So, one of my main issues with the Snow White live adaptation dress is that unfortunately it is a combination of all primary colors, which are red, blue, and yellow. For like a second, I was like, what was the third color? Anyway, this is usually a recipe for disaster because if we mix all those three colors together, we are going into superhero territory. I mean, as a superhero, those are great colors if you want to stand out against the blue sky or against a burning building or just stand out in general because, well, you're a superhero, but it's not such a great choice for a Disney princess. But that is where we're at. Snow White dress has very vivid, bold colors that are basically all competing with each other, creating the unfortunate effect of a crazy clown costume. As opposed to the 1937 version, where the yellow isn't quite as vibrant and a lot more pale and isn't too overpowering. The blue and the red are also darker, which adds a nice balance, and you can argue that the original version was more subdued and less vivid because this was the first ever animated movie. But to me, the original dress works so much better because the colors are more in harmony with each other. Disney could have gone two ways with the live adaptation. They could have gone dark, muted tones like in Snow White and the Huntsman, or they could have gone bright colors, campy, and extravagant like in Mirror Mirror. Both Snow White adaptation both came out around the same time and went completely opposite directions, and both in terms of costumes were executed to perfection. So Disney decided to go kind of mid, as in not going in any specific direction and trying to be as close as possible to the source material and not change too much. Now, don't get me wrong, the costumes of the Evil Queen are absolutely gorgeous, especially the crown that is very detailed and ornate, but the Snow White dress just looks way too similar to the actual costume that little girls put on Halloween, which makes it look super cheap and has Party City written all over it. So, for example, in Cinderella, the original movie, Cinderella is wearing a beautiful silver dress, and in the live adaptation, she's wearing this beautiful blue dress that pays homage to the original, but doesn't try to copy it exactly. So, this is a good example of how the change they made from the original movie works really well in the live adaptation because by making the dress blue, it really helps make Cinderella pop in the middle of a ballroom scene and stand out against everyone else. This is also the color Disney used in their merchandise for Cinderella. So if Disney wanted Snow White's dress to have bright, bold colors that really stands out, they could have done it in a more sophisticated way, like in Mirror Mirror. For example, this blue dress has little orange pops of color. No, orange is warm tone and blue is cool tone. When you use them together, they are complementary colors that elevate each other. So if the Snow White dress had blue mixed with shades of dark blood orange, it would have worked much better than the bright red color. Or, for example, in this picture, we see that the dress has three colors, yellow, pink, and green, that aren't necessarily colors that mix well together. But since they're all soft pastel colors, they're a lot more harmonious as opposed to very bold, saturated colors like in the Snow White dress. So there's a lot of ways to go about this. Also, another issue that I have with the dress is that it looks like a totally different outfit from Snow White's wardrobe, if that makes sense. When we see her in her first dress, it has more plain muted tones. So when we see her later in the iconic Snow White dress, it is a huge contrast to what she was wearing prior to that. It is such a change that just doesn't look natural to her character, unless this is intentional, like in Cinderella, where in the beginning we see her in a plain outfit, which makes her transformation into a ball gown more stunning and effective. But in Snow White's case, she's not going to a fancy ball. She's running away from the evil queen. So why are we seeing such a sharp difference in her wardrobe? In the original movie, you can tell that the first dress has a lot of similarities to the iconic dress, and the differences are much more subtle, making it more of a natural progression. She's also wearing a traveling cloak, and the live adaptation doesn't utilize this piece of clothing, even though it makes perfect sense with the story, since she's running away and she would try to hide under a cloak or use it to keep her warm in the woods. And I don't want this to feel like a dig at Sandy Powell, who's the costume designer, who also did Cinderella and Mary Poppins. And I absolutely love the costumes in both of those films. But I think for this particular dress, she just missed a mark. So that's my only critique. I mean, obviously, this movie has a lot more to critique about, but I am not going to get into it because I don't have 10 hours right now to explain everything that's wrong with this movie. So I'm just focusing on the dress alone. To me, I was never a fan of Snow White. My go-to movie growing up was The Little Mermaid, so Snow White was not my cup of tea. But I do appreciate the story, even though it's like a super dark fairy tale. It does touches on the subject of vanity and what it's like to be a woman and beauty standards and fear of being replaced by a younger version, and also can be called a substance. But I do feel like this story just keeps being told again and again, so it's going to remain relevant for years to come. That said, I do think Disney should stop making live adaptations because they are just not as good as the original. And I think they lost their way and need to get back to making original stories like they used to. So those are my thoughts on the Snow White dress. And let me know your thoughts as well.